The first thing I wanted to start with, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it on this podcast since it happened, DeMar DeRozan is a Sacramento King, not something I even would have thought about predicting at the beginning of the offseason. What do you make of his, I want to start there. What do you make of his overall fit on Sacramento?
It's interesting. I think, it's an upgrade for them in the sense of like, hey, we needed another creator. And, DeRozan has become more than just a scorer. He's done a great job as a playmaker. We know what happens when he gets to the elbow. I think it's a smart move for them. It's a definite upgrade. Like, I don't want to just poo-poo this. This is a good upgrade for the Kings. They got a veteran presence. I mean, they got probably one of the best locker room guys in the NBA. I haven't seen anybody say a bad thing about DeMar DeRozan in terms of being a good teammate and being a good guy in general. And I think, also former Trojan, so fight on. It's just what we do. It's what we produce, good people. The ultimate don't.
What's Matt Leonard doing these days? Do you want to stand by that, or
don't research anything? And his name's Matt Leinart, not Leonard, but that's a whole, again, different story. But I think he's a good fit in terms of just what he can bring offensively and bring a little more versatility to their offense. I have questions for this team defensively. I have questions for this team, even on the offensive end. I think this is a team that doesn't shoot the three ball enough. Mm-hmm. And I think bringing in a guy like DeMar DeRozan does not increase the amount of three balls you're shooting, but kind of lowers it. I was disappointed in their offseason last year. I felt like I have a problem with teams staying still in the NBA now, because I think in the NBA you just can't stay still. You have to be constantly.
Nuggets got rid of KCP. You think they needed to change it up? I get it.
No, yeah, okay. We'll get to them in a minute.
Did you miss that? You did not.
You and your dumb stuff you do try to pin me one way or another. I think it's just more of, it'll be interesting. It's an upgrade. Like, they needed to make a change. They needed to kind of improve. They did veteran presence, all that fun stuff. Having Malik Monk continue to come off the bench, I thought he had a great season for them. I know everybody's like, oh, DeMar's improved defensively and things like that. I really worry about this team defensively. I think this puts them in the range of a possible playoff team, but I think more likely a play-in team.
I read it as, I still don't know where I land up on the fit. I think the 2030 pick swap is fucking with me, to be honest. I don't know. I just felt like I wouldn't have given that up. But I am more intrigued.
That went to San Antonio, right?
Yeah, they're just collecting them, and the Thunder collecting. I mean, San Antonio has to have the market cornered on like any pick commitments post 2028 at this point, like because they got some swaps and they have that Minnesota pick.
I don't know. I feel like Oklahoma still has more picks.
Oh,
they have picks that they're not supposed to have. Like in 2050, I feel like they have somebody's unprotected pick. Like it's.
There's going to be a draft where half of the first rounders are just going to Utah and OKC. I don't know what draft it's going to be, but it's going to end up happening. I'm intrigued by it. I was wondering did you take it as, I read it as two things, aside from everything that you said, because you're talking about the defenses. I did read it as a hashtag fuck defense at this point. Like, our offense kind of pulled back last year. A large part of that was they dealt with injuries. Herter had a down season. And then the Sabonis without Fox minutes were not great, which was kind of a departure from the year before. But I kind of just read it as like, well, we're just going to really soup up our offense because that's what had us, like that's how we got here to where people expected us to make the playoffs. But I also kind of took it as a vote of confidence in two players, Keegan Murray for what he did defensively last year, maybe even a vote of confidence in Keon Ellis defensively. But I also took it as kind of a vote of confidence in De'Aaron Fox at both ends of the floor. I thought he wasn't as stiff defensively last year. I don't know if you disagree with that. And then just, he's become a good enough shooter or off-ball player to where I'm immediately concerned. My biggest concern is like, well, what does the spacing in the offense look like during Sabonis, Fox, and Sabonis, DeRozan, Fox minutes? And it's like, well, maybe just Fox is versatile enough at both ends to where I'm reading too much into that. And so have you given any consideration to maybe that element of it?
It's a bit hard, like when you look at those three, because you're not taking the ball out of Fox's hands. Right. And listen, he's improved as a shooter. Kudos to him. Good job as off the dribble shooting threes and things like that. If I'm a team, I'm still like daring him to just go under. Still going to try to just go under screens a couple of times. Maybe I'll mix it up and go over a few times, but I'm not going to be, it's not to the point where I'm so afraid of that 3-point shot, because I'm more afraid of him getting to the rim with that lightning quick speed, that I'm kind of more willing to kind of concede that three. But then it's harder because it's like, all right, so DeRozan, you're going to space. Cool. That's a blessing for the defense. That's one more guy in the paint because they, whatever, kick out threes, DeRozan's going to have to take some of those, have to make some of those. But again, as a defense, you're just going to be like, we're going to live with that. And I think that's more of a thing. And it's going to be more of an issue come playoff time than regular season, I think is kind of the deal. But spacing will be a premium for them. Like, they're going to have a hard time figuring that stuff out. I love Keegan Murray. I think he's got a chance to be really, really good. I'd like to see them give him a little more opportunities at the elbow and be a little more of a playmaker from there and develop that and flex
That's
that
not
muscle.
happening.
It's not, but that's what I want, Dan. But like him having to step out and shoot more threes, come off pin downs, which he does really well. Like, they're going to have to do a lot more of that stuff. It just gets interesting. And I think the DeRozan piece is going to take some work from Mike Brown in terms of how to kind of put together a fluid offense with that, because there's not going to be spacing is going to be a very difficult thing for them to come across.
Which is also why I was happy. I know he's coming off shoulder surgery and didn't have the best year, and maybe they'll still move him in a subsequent deal. But you brought Monk back, and the fact that it was Kevin Herter was not used as one of the matching salaries, I thought that was beneficial to them because they needed that floor space. And it's a team, they shot threes really well last year. I think they were third in percentage, but they were like 16th or 17th in the frequency with which they shot from three. Like you said, DeRozan's not going to take them. We know Sabonis isn't going to take a ton. So that was important. They kept Herter. So I remain very optimistic about the offense, but I am with you with the defensive questions. The way I'm reading this is that I don't know that they actually care. Like, maybe they really do believe in Fox and Ellis and Murray, but when you do look at this team, though, is there like an archetype of player or a specific player, or just something that's, I know you mentioned shooting, but like if you had your druthers, if they could add one thing or one type of player that would maybe tie this all together in a more firm fashion, does any, again, archetype sort of spring to mind?
Are the Knicks going to trade Mikal Bridges to them? Or, I mean, like, that's probably kind of the guy. I think that would have been a nice little kind of like a 3-and-D type guy for them, is probably more what they need than anything else. And it's nice if they can do stuff off the dribble. I think one thing we learned from the Boston Celtics is just having so many guys that can, handle the ball and attack is really important. We see it with OKC and what they're trying to build. I think that's kind of more of the same of what you're hoping you're going to get. And you're going to hope that Keon Ellis is going to develop some of that, and show some of those things. I think it's going to come down to just defense, and they can sit there and punt on defense all they want. But I'm just going to tell you, man, like, you're not going to win a lot in the NBA if you're just not going to give up, if you're not going to get stops.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Their goal probably shouldn't be a championship because they're not a championship level team right now, but their goal should be playoffs. But like, they need to pull wins. So maybe the attitude is right. And hey, like, screw it, let's just go with the offense and be a flame out in the first round. But like, it's hard for me when teams just kind of punt on defense, because I just don't think that's a way in which you can feel comfortable that you're fully going to survive in that. The long run, I just feel like it's going to hurt you.
Would there'd have to be other framework. Would someone, like, if you had to give up Kevin Herter but got Dorian Finney-Smith back, does something like that move you, or are you more worried about the then 3-point volume you're conceding going from Kevin Herter to Dorian Finney-Smith?
Well, look how bad he shot it from three. I'm not worried about his 3-point volume at that point. I know he might have a better year this time around, but like, Dorian Finney-Smith can knock a couple down. Like, I'm not too worried about that. Like, that's actually a nice name and a good comp. The guy actually who I think we should really keep an eye on for being on the move at some point is Cam Johnson from Brooklyn. I think that could be a guy that could also help them. Maybe a little too similar to Harrison Barnes, who they just traded, but I think that's a guy that can kind of be
better
a good
defensively
fit.
For sure.
Oh yeah. But I think, and maybe not as good offensively, but can definitely stretch the floor. I feel like that's a guy I would try to keep an eye on. If I was Sacramento, I'd probably kick the tires and see what the asking price is.
What about someone like, do you think a Kuzma could still help this team, or is he not improved enough defensively? Denny Avdia would have been dynamite for them. They were
Kuzma
Denny
can help.
Avdia.
Kuzma can help any team. I'll be honest with you. Like, the race to get Kuzma should be pretty high. If you're Washington, all the moves they're making should be guys that they can turn into picks, and going forward for them. But Kuzma would be can help any team. I think defensively and offensively. It's whether he wants to accept that role. Like we saw the fact that he had a chance to be traded to Dallas last year and didn't want to be that guy. And so I think the question is, as long as he wants to be, as long as he's willing to accept that role and maybe sacrifice some shots and play a little more defense, I think he'd be great in that role. I think that's the role he's perfect for in the NBA. And I think that's something that the Kings, again, another name that I would be like, I wouldn't think would be a bad name for the Kings.
I would like to see them at least make a smaller type move where it's, can we just get Torrey Craig from the Bulls or Jay Sean Tate from the Rockets because their rotation's so crowded? Just someone who figures to be not necessarily an upgrade, not going to be an upgrade over Ellis or Murray, but just like, can we get another defensive minded body on the perimeter in here? I would feel a lot better because I don't hate the DeRozan team, but it wasn't like when I saw it and the terms and looking at the fit, it doesn't necessarily feel like a home run either, even though it's a very clear talent upgrade.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a single, hey, we upgraded our talent. We've improved our chances going into the season next year. It's one of those things that's promising, but it wasn't like I was running through the streets going like, oh my God, like how are the other teams going to respond to it? Like I think that's kind of the way I looked at it. It was a good move for Sacramento. No question about it to me. Maybe they did give up a little bit too much with that 2030 unprotected pick swap, but that's kind of the price to play nowadays. And I think those are the situations they're in. And I think that's going to be, ultimately we'll just see kind of how it plays out for them. I just don't think their ceiling's higher than like a 5 seed.